You think you've seen every great Western? Think again. Number 4 on this list pushed 3D technology in ways you wouldn't expect from a Western, while number 7 was such a disaster on release that it nearly destroyed the director's career. But now, it's a cult classic. Barbarossa is the kind of Western that catches you off guard. For one, Willie Nelson plays the title character alongside Gary Busey. Directed by Fred Schepisi, who's actually Australian, Barbarossa brings a fresh perspective to the genre. It's also worth noting that this was Schepisi's first American film, but he would go on to direct more big hits like Roxanne and 6 Degrees of Separation. It's one of those movies where you can feel the director experimenting and finding his voice, which makes it even more compelling. Now, if you're looking for something a little more meta, Rustler's Rhapsody is where it's at. Starring Tom Berenger as Rex, a singing cowboy who's somehow aware of the Western genre tropes he's trapped in, this movie is a self-aware, genre-bending comedy. Some critics didn't get it when it was released, maybe because it's trying to balance both satire and homage at the same time. But for fans who think Westerns take themselves too seriously, this is a breath of fresh air. This one's a bit of a hidden gem, mostly because it's a made-for-TV movie that didn't get a theatrical release. But with Sam Elliott in the lead as Con Valiant, you know you're in for something special. Elliott was born to play these Western roles, and his take on Valiant is as rugged and believable as ever. The film might have slipped through the cracks, especially with The Quick and the Dead from 1995 getting more attention. But this 1987 version deserves a second look. Here's a Western you might not have heard of. What makes this one stand out is the fact that it was shot in 3D, a big deal in the early 80s. The movie helped revive the 3D trend in Hollywood, and it's a unique experience, especially for the Western genre. Director Ferdinando Baldi was no stranger to the Western scene, and this was one of his final films. You can feel his confidence in the direction, making Kamin at Ya not just an entertaining film, but a fascinating piece of filmmaking history. Clint Eastwood might be synonymous with Westerns, but Bronco Billy shows a different side of him. He plays the leader of a struggling Wild West show, and the movie has a quirky, almost self-referential feel to it. It's not another Eastwood tough guy role, it's one of his funniest performances. The film didn't make a huge splash when it came out, but looking back, it's got a charm that's hard to ignore. If you love Eastwood but haven't seen Bronco Billy, you're missing out on a lighter, more playful take on the Western genre. Hard Country brings us a young Kim Basinger in her film debut, and that alone makes it worth watching. Kim plays Jody, a woman torn between staying in Texas or chasing her dreams elsewhere, with her boyfriend Kyle holding her back. Directed by David Green, this film didn't exactly light the world on fire back in the day, but it's rare to find a female-led Western in the 80s, which gives Hard Country a unique edge. Heaven's Gate has gone down in history as one of the biggest box office bombs of all time, but is it really that bad? Directed by Michael Cimino, this epic tale about a class struggle between poor immigrants and wealthy cattle ranchers is packed with a stellar cast. Chris Christopherson, Christopher Walken, and John Hurt, to name a few. It may have flopped back then, but in recent years, people are starting to recognize its merits. It's a gritty, thought-provoking Western that touches on issues like income inequality that still resonate today. Two teenage girls, outlaws, and the Doolin Dalton gang, Cattle Annie and Little Britches, is a wild, underrated ride. Critics back in the day appreciated the actors, especially the performances of a young Diane Lane and Amanda Plummer. It's a fun and fresh take on the Western, one of the rare 80s examples that focuses on young women and their rebellious ambitions. It's also got a good sense of humor, making it lighter than your average Western. An Australian Western that hasn't received the love it deserves in the US. The Man from Snowy River is a heartfelt story about Jim Craig, a young man trying to save his family farm after his father's death. It's a beautifully shot film with sweeping landscapes and a great cast. Kirk Douglas in a dual role adds some serious star power. It's got all the emotional beats of a classic Western, but with a unique Aussie twist. Tom Horn is a Western that's as much about what happened off-screen as it is about what made it to the screen. Starring Steve McQueen as the titular Tom Horn, the film had a troubled production, with multiple directors being brought in and eventually replaced. Despite the chaos behind the scenes, Tom Horn remains an interesting look at a real-life figure in Western history, and McQueen's gritty performance is still worth watching.